This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
How many illegal police stations are operating in Canada? I'll direct the question to csis, please.
So, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back a bit in my memory here. I think at the time, first of all, I'm not sure that I would necessarily call them police stations. I think what we have seen over the past few months is individuals who have links back to the PRC who are supporting some of the work of the PRC. Often individuals who have been perhaps co-opted. We at one point were looking at, and it was in the media, I think there were 3 that were being looked at, and the RCMP was fully engaged in regards to those stations, and I wouldn't want to comment any more in regards to the activities of the RCMP.
Is it your understanding that they're continuing to operate or that they've been closed?
Point of order, Chair.
Go ahead with your point of order.
Thank you. Our study is on social media platforms. I'm trying to see the connection between our study and the questions being asked.
Sure, Mr. Barrett will make a connection at some point. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett. I understand your point, but
on that point
it's his time. I'm going to give him. I'm going to give him his time. Go ahead.
On the point of order.
Go ahead, Mr.
Well,
Barrett.
the question speaks to transnational repression, and I think that it's important to establish that there's foreign state actors engaged in this, and the activity that is done. In the example that I'm attempting to ask the witnesses about, is perpetrated by the same state actors who are engaging in this transnational repression using social media technologies, and some of which were outlined in the initial statements. But I mean, I'm not sure how much I need to qualify my line of questioning, but I'm happy to go further on the committee's time, but not out of my questioning time, if that's what you'd like.
Okay, thank you. And just for the benefit of members of the committee, I generally try to give a lot of latitude to each member who's given their 6 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever the case is. I expect that Mr. Barrett's going to make a connection. He made a compelling argument there, and I'm going to continue with Mr. Barrett. I did stop your time. You have 4 minutes and 51 seconds. Go ahead.
Beijing conducting transnational repression activities here on our soil, evidenced by these so-called police stations, if you will, meaning that Chinese Canadians are being targeted for intimidation and influence. That's the purpose of these so-called police stations.
So what I would say to that is I wouldn't specifically focus on the so-called police stations. What I would say to you is there is absolutely foreign interference activity happening in our country, but it can come in all forms and varieties. By focusing on just the police station, I worry that individuals would then miss what else is happening in the environment.
And I appreciate that. Is it understood that it's a technique of the dictatorship in Beijing to scrape social media to be able to isolate and target the people that they're looking to, that are the intended targets of those repressive activities? Is social media a tool that is used so that their agents that are acting out of these locations can gather that intelligence and then target those individuals?
So I think that's a really interesting question, and one that we actually need to discuss. And a lot of it comes to how Canadians protect their own personal information, or any citizen of the world, let's say. So if you are quite open at putting a lot of your personal information out on social media, absolutely hostile states are going to be able to scrape that data, regardless. It doesn't have to be China. It could be other hostile states that we're dealing with. And I think that's also very important. Don't lose sight of all of the hostile activity directed against Canadians by focusing on just one actor. It's really important to totally protect all of your social media access, your data that you put out on there, because you're absolutely right in the comment that you made that hostile states will pull that information, they can collate and they can crunch the big data, and they can do very targeted attention if they want to.
So foreign state actors don't just target the diaspora communities within our country. They also target elected officials, and we've seen media reports about those efforts. In recent months, we saw that there were stories about a spamiflage campaign targeting certain politicians on their social media. Has the dictatorship in Beijing been identified as the source of that campaign?
Sammy, would you be able to answer that particular question? I'm not. Okay. I'm not sure if I could indicate whether or not it went actually back to China. I'd have to go back and see what actually we knew about that. But what I can say is, again, you're very right. Individuals will pull all of that data and target who they feel is somebody that they either need to try and repress, they want to get more information on them, they want to try and influence them in regards to the activities they may be engaging in. So absolutely, social media can be used in order to collect the information to do that.
And so these are foreign interference activities, even if you aren't able to say which foreign state actor is responsible. That's what these activities are.
I would term that as a foreign interference activity, yes.
And are you able to say how many Canadian politicians have been targeted by foreign state actors engaging in these interference activities? Just a number, if you could.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a specific number, but again, what I would say is every single politician, member of parliament should always be aware and protect their personal information, their privacy, and be aware of if somebody or an entity is trying to approach you in order to engage in some sort of foreign interference activity. It can come in all forms and shapes.
Sure. Are you able to say how the rapid response mechanism came into play in the case of the spamiflage targeting of elected officials?
No, that would be GAC. GAC would be, or Foreign Affairs is the one that manages the rapid response mechanism.
Sure. So at what point is your understanding that government is made aware of attempts by foreign state actors to target Canadians, including Canadian politicians? Is it specifically GAC, or does our national security agency like csis engage at some point, obviously being aware that this is ongoing?
Yep, so absolutely. The Minister of Public Safety back several months ago issued a ministerial directive which indicated that if we became aware of, within the service, of activities of negative activities directed against politicians by hostile foreign states, then we were to look at the information, determine the threat value of that information, and then reach out and advise the various political actors.
Thank you.
Did you advise at any time that the government should ban TikTok from government phones?
We provide advice to the government on foreign interference in the general sense, but I'm not aware of us advising specifically to the social media platform.
I'm still struck that this one social media platform, given all of the controversies around all the other ones, was targeted. It feels like it was a political decision, not an evidence-based decision. That's my opinion. It's not yours. But I would ask, in terms of threats, you have the mandate to investigate threats to national security. How often does csis investigate activities on social media platforms as it relates to threats to national security, Mr. Madhu?
We investigate threat actors. We don't investigate social media platforms. So depending on how threat actors are evolving, we may have insight into what goes on a platform, but otherwise we investigate actors.
How often do you detect the presence of foreign interference services on social media platforms?
I think that detecting sort of counter-narrative on social media platforms may be a common occurrence, but to link them specifically to a hostile threat actor is a bit more complex. So I'm not sure how often that happens. We do know that threat actors, such as my colleague mentioned from the PRC or Russia or other hostile state actors, do that, but I don't have a specific number for you.
Thank you.
And thanks to our witnesses for being here. In the fallout of the October 7th attack on Israeli citizens, there was information shared by a terrorist organization that the Prime Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister, and other members of the government and other political parties shared that the IDF had bombed a hospital. This became spread like rapid fire on social media, yet was deemed to be very quickly to be categorically false. Our five allies knew that this was misinformation, but our government refused to react. That is an example. Can Ms. Henderson, can you share how that sort of actions of the government would contribute to the erosion of trust and maybe some of the challenges associated with social media and the influence that foreign states could have over the Canadian population?
Not quite sure what you're asking me, I'm sorry.
So when the Prime Minister, when the Minister of Foreign Affairs refused to retract what misinformation, they contributed to misinformation that spread rapidly online. I know it showed up in my feed, and it was forwarded to me by constituents as well. When governments are slow to respond to combating misinformation, does that contribute to foreign state actors and the influence that they may have over Canadians?
So, thank you for the question. How I would answer that would be to say that in any situation, any foreign threat actor is always monitoring everything that's going on within a country of interest, and they will pick up on any little piece of information and they can magnify that into misinformation or disinformation in order to achieve their goal, and they will continue to magnify that until they feel that the damage is done.
I appreciate that. So certainly the need to combat misinformation is essential. Now, in the about 45 seconds I've left to either here, there's a disconnect between what TikTok has shared with this committee, between the privacy settings that may be present on a phone and the gray side of social media where there may be unknown information that is collected. So I'm wondering if Ms. Henderson, you can comment about how we reconcile that disconnect that exists between what social media companies are saying versus what we're hearing today and has been reported in the media.
So thank you for the question. I think the way to answer, I'm going to answer that is to indicate there is always going to be that, as you noted, a gray area. So there is the policy and what the social media company is collecting and engaging intentionally, such as they had indicated email addresses. But as Mr. Curry had indicated earlier, it's not only the email address that you've signed up, but it's everything else that you are doing as an individual on that site that is also data that can be collected. And that's what we call, in many cases, big data, that they will scrape all that big data off and then they can do their data crunching. So that is where some of the danger comes in, and that's where they can start to find the trends and the ways they can do the interference and the influence.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Thank you, Mr.
I just need a few seconds. I just wanted to clarify something Mr. Couric said, because the Canadian government actually reviewed the information on the hospital bombing on our own, and the Prime Minister and quite emphatically in the House of Commons and elsewhere confirmed that it was not Israel who bombed the hospital. In fact, I remember the Conservative colleague standing up and applauding when he said that in the House. So I just want to make sure the record reflects that we did do our own investigation, Chair, and that we did, in fact, call out the misinformation. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Callaway.
Chair, I would just note that that was 5 days after the information was shared.